All right, guys, I'm going to continue reading some of my prior blog posts that you can find at StephanieMoDavis.com. And I'd like to get your thoughts on these topics. So today we're going to talk about a path to wholeness and the concept of the duality that lives within us and all around. So here we go. The interplay of opposites is a constant companion within our own lives and within our relationships. Day and night, pleasure and pain, confidence and humility. These polarities seem to define the very fabric of our existence. Yet, as we begin to peel back the layers of our thoughts, emotions, and actions, we find that true balance and integration lie not in these extremes, but in the development and awareness of the subtle middle ground that connects them. The tendency toward duality is deeply rooted in the human psyche. You can just think about the right and left hemisphere of the brain and the different functions. Our minds, forever seeking to make sense of the world, often fall into the trap of binary thinking, dividing the universe into stark contrasts and struggling to reconcile their inherent tensions. This dynamic manifests in our personal lives as well, as we oscillate between outer expression of hubris and martyrdom, for instance, never quite finding the grounded center point of genuine confidence and humility. That's an important one. I love that association. Difference between hubris and martyrdom, or that more center point of confidence and genuine humility. However, this black and white perspective is ultimately an illusion, a conceptual overlay that obscures the underlying unity that permeates all of existence. When we shift our gaze inward and begin to delayer the contents of our consciousness, we discover that these seemingly opposing forces within us are not enemies, but complementary aspects of a greater whole. Confidence, for example, is not the antithesis of humility, but rather its positive variant or counterpart. True confidence arises not from an inflated ego or a desperate need for validation, but from a profound self-acceptance and a clear-eyed understanding of one's unique gifts and limitations. Humility, in turn, is not a self-effacing weakness, but a humble reverence for the vastness of the human experience and the mystery that lies beyond the individual self. Similarly, the tendencies towards hubris and opposing that martyrdom, when examined closely, reveal their common root in a fundamental disconnection from the self and the broader tapestry of life. Hubris, with its grandiose self-importance, is merely a desperate attempt to conceal a deep-seated insecurity, while martyrdom, with its self-sacrificing posturing, often stems from a subconscious need for validation and control. Again, by delayering these patterns and recognizing their underlying unity, we can cultivate a more balanced, integrated perspective, one that embraces the full spectrum of our human experience without succumbing to the allure of all the extremes. This is the path of true integration and wholeness, where we no longer see ourselves as fragmented beings, but rather as a multifaceted expression of a greater intelligence that transcends the limitation of our individual mind's capacity. In this state of what we'll call integration, we find freedom to dance gracefully between confidence and humility, to harness the power of our unique gifts without becoming beholden to them, and to engage with the world from a place of authentic presence and service. It is a journey of self-discovery, self-awareness, and self-acceptance that invites us to embrace the inherent duality of our nature, while paradoxically and simultaneously recognizing the deeper unity that's interwoven and that binds us all together. As we try to navigate the complexities of our modern world today, this paradigm shift holds the promise of profound personal and collective and cultural transformation. By transcending those constraints of strictly thinking in polarity and duality, we start to cultivate a holistic, balanced perspective. And this is when we begin to unlock avenues of true evolution, growth, connection and the potential of our contribution together as a whole, not just for ourselves, but for the entire family and the world that we share together. So this is something that I've been working on personally for close to deeply for 8 years. I was working on it in the years I was practicing yoga and Eastern medicine and spirituality, but it really hit me 8 years ago when I started to see more clearly the aspects of latching on to an extreme part of us, right? Either you want to look at it as right and left brain and the different qualities. I'll give you an example. For me, because I have been brought up specifically, I leaned towards an imbalance in my left analytical brain, actually. I relied heavily on my intuition, and I relied heavily on the elements of this unity consciousness and spirit, when in all actuality, we are very much living here in the three-dimensional plane of duality. So there was an element of I could find a personal escape by attaching to different ideologies that weren't really grounded in reality. I didn't have the broadness or the ability to hold a paradox quite yet of, yes, there's a greater element of unity and we're all connected, but I have to learn how to navigate in dysfunction and the traumas that are being expressed in the duality and the polarities and the horror, basically, of what we see in our 3D reality. You can't just escape mentally and not be a part, I believe. So again, for some people, it's the opposite, right? It's very much of an intellectual or material bypass, and they're very disconnected from their ultimate truer nature, or this connection of unity and oneness and interrelatedness and spirit, quite frankly. Especially if you grew up following the traditional Western culture model of, I go to school, then I go to college, and then I get married, and then I have kids, and then I get a job, and a system that it's like you become very myopically focused because that's what you've been conditioned to believe is the way, right? Because you're too focused, you're too deep into one way, and you've lost sight of the whole. And then when you do start to come in contact with people who seemingly oppose your belief system, it's very dysregulating. And the initial emotional reaction is to blame, shame, and guilt and call the other guy stupid, right? Meanwhile, you're right. And we're coming to find out that both sides have very valid components that contribute towards a better holistic model together. So it is within us. It starts within us to be able to admit the trigger when it arises and to genuinely do self-analysis to decipher whether or not you're in resistance to seeing a bias or shadow that person, place, or thing may be pointing out within you before there's an immediate judgment. So at this time in history, this seems to be complicated, but I assure you that there are vast amounts of people and communities who are deeply committed and devoted to doing this sort of work. And they are finding this center point. And it seems to be that they are living in a slightly different reality than the one that's playing out. And again, we're still navigating both worlds, but you definitely can begin to take the journey towards your own inner self-development and awareness and developing this state of consciousness, this evolutionary state that we're moving towards, which is definitely distilling what we need from this material aspect and also from the spiritual aspect to find more of a harmonious balance between our own inner duality, and we can start to live in a state of more balance and grace. Thank you guys. Talk soon. Let me know your thoughts.